Natalie has this one. Now, the question is, what is next for Haiti? And in the wake of the assassination of the Haitian president, we want to find out what is in store for Haiti now and how is the country going to move forward. So Natalie has this next one on Spotlight on now.
All right, thank you so much, Carrie. It's just about 20 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock. And as I said, we do have Sir Ronald Sanders here with us this morning. He is the Antigua and Barbuda ambassador to the Organization of American States and also to Washington, I think. So let's just pause and say good morning to you, Ambassador, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much. So we just wanted to look at the Haiti crisis and to just figure out, the role that CARICOM playing. But before we get to CARICOM, let's just talk about what is happening now on the ground in Haiti. If you could just give us an update, because we know that it's something that you follow.
Well, it's a very volatile situation in the aftermath of President Moïse's assassination. There is a constitutional and political crisis in Haiti. There is accompanying that as well a humanitarian crisis, in the sense that Haiti, as you know, is the poorest country in our hemisphere. It has been a place of deprivation for a very, very long time. Of the 11 million people in Haiti, only 500,000 of them have permanent jobs. That means we've got 10.5 million people in Haiti who are virtually unemployed. That figure is larger than the entire population of CARICOM, except for Haiti, of course. So you understand the magnitude of the economic issue. Then there's a health issue. Haiti has not delivered a single vaccine up until recently. The population that large, if you're trying to get to 70% herd immunity, you understand the magnitude of the task that lies before the health authorities of Haiti. So there's that as well. So we start with economic circumstances that are dire, health circumstances that are very poor, people who are suffering from malnutrition and have been for a long time. And now you have, on top of that, this constitutional and political crisis. Beyond all of that, what is playing out is a great deal of violence. Haiti is now, unfortunately, subject to a number of gangs who have been ruling the place for the last few months, if not a little longer than that. They're rival gangs. They're gangs associated with political figures. You have gangs that have taken over police stations. Some claim because they had connections with police who didn't pay them in the end, and therefore they took over the police stations themselves. Now, in all of this, it's the poor and the vulnerable who suffer the most. And they have been subject, if you could believe it, to kidnappings, ransom demands, and not just made to rich people, to poor people as well. And then when people don't pay up, they're murdered, but brutally. And in some cases, people's bodies have even been burnt. So it's not it's an awful situation generally. And the political crisis that is facing it now has caused great anxiety throughout the hemisphere and, of course, in CARICOM itself.
Yeah, things are extremely bad in Haiti. And the question becomes, with the assassination of President Moïse, do you think that was, came about as a result of the fact that he's been ruling by decree since 2020 and that we haven't had, legislative elections, general elections, as it should have been had? Do you think these things contributed to, what happened over the last 2 weeks or so?
Undoubtedly. Any person, any leader who believes that they can run a country by decree with no legislative body, no oversight body, a judiciary that is raided and weakened, with a police force in which the commissioner of police and others are appointed only by him, where there are no independent bodies. The structures of democracy and the rule of law have been destroyed. People are crying out for justice, and you attract that kind of attention.
But Sir Ronald, how does the United States play into this? Because I know that President Moise had the support and the backing of the United States. How does that work when he's doing all of these things that are considered illegal and cruel? And when we compare that to how it has responded to Venezuela.
Yes, there is a huge contradiction there, I agree. And the situation in Haiti has always been much worse than it is in Venezuela, frankly. The situation was much worse when last year, for instance, there was an attempt to steal the elections by the ruling APNU party. And that thing, as you remember, was prolonged from March until August. And people were critical of what was happening there. That situation was far worse in Haiti, and the United States and Canada never raised their voice once against it.
Yeah.
So we've seen this double standard play out, and as it's playing out now, look at what the comparison is between the protests that are happening in Cuba and the kind of mass hysteria you've seen in the United States from congressmen and others who were absolutely silent when Haiti was going through its worst circumstances. Yeah. Nobody raised a voice. And that, of course, probably encouraged Moise, but encouraged as well the cabal that is around him. And I don't believe myself, this is a personal view, that we have reached the top of the totem pole yet of who is responsible for Moise's assassination. I think there's much more to be revealed. And I think we will be surprised at what comes out of it all.
But you know what? Who will do that investigation and how much can we trust it? Because when you're talking about police stations being overtaken by gangs, when you're talking about, you know, a judiciary that somehow is just I mean, there are people in strategic places who've all been placed by Moise. What kind of investigation we're going to have and by whom to get to the truth?
Well, the one silver lining in all of that, and what you say is, of course, quite relevant. You know, you don't put the fox into the hen house and expect to get good results. But the United States has now sent a civilian, not military, civilian investigative team into Haiti at the request of the Haitian authorities. To help with the investigation. And they are quite keen to ensure that, that the culprits are caught. Now, it's in as much in everybody's interest for the real culprits to be identified and brought to justice, because with the gangs who are amongst the richest people in Haiti, they have the capacity to mobilize money. And if, for instance, Moise were to pursue this idea that he can hold elections in September, I can assure you that what will happen there is the people who will be elected to Parliament, to the National Assembly, will be representatives of those gangs and drug lords. We will have in Haiti a criminal enterprise as the government. And that has got to be everybody's worst nightmare. Because already a transit point and a very serious and porous one for drug trafficking and other criminality, Haiti would become even worse. Now, that's one of the things the United States is fearful of, and which is why they readily sent in investigators to help to track down who is responsible for all of this. But in the meantime, who are we talking to? Because we've got 3 claimants now. For the leadership of the country. It's a very murky situation. It's unclear. And the one thing that we are sure of is that if it is not clarified soon, if the parties do not come together to try to form some broad-based government of national unity that can postpone elections, which couldn't possibly be held in September, delayed for a time, start to put in the institutions of democracy and law and order that are needed, this is going to be absolute chaos. So
now, I know that in 2016, you were part of a delegation that was able to help with having that interim government in Haiti, that broad-based interim government that saw some calm and some stability to Haiti, but I'm thinking, what is the role of CARICOM now in getting that in place so we can have, because as you said in your article, who do we trust? Who do we trust to put that interim government in place so that the people of Haiti, can believe in who is there and can trust who is there so that there's calm and stability?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the delegation. In 2016, I wasn't part of the delegation. I led the delegation.
Right.
And it was a delegation of the Organization of American States, not CARICOM. The only Caribbean person on that delegation was me. So, but I led that delegation that led to President Martelly demitting office when his constitutional period was over. The crisis was that they had no election for a president, much in the same way that we've got the vacuum now with no clear person to succeed Martelly. Martelly was planning to stay on, despite the fact that his term was over. People were rioting in the streets. I saw personally a man being bludgeoned to death outside of the palace in Haiti while I was there. I saw other acts of violence that were horrific. And unfortunately, the tendency for that kind of violence in Haiti is very real. But you ask about how we resolve this.
How CARICOM can help in getting that interim government in place, that broad-based interim government where the political parties are represented so that the people of Haiti can feel a sense that, they can get some calm and stability because it's not a power grab.
Well, there are two things we have to be conscious of here. First of all, nobody can go into Haiti to help mediate or to facilitate a dialogue amongst the parties unless they're invited to do so. If you go into Haiti, then you're meddling and you're interfering in the internal affairs of Haiti. So as in everything else, an official invitation has to come from Haiti. The question is who delivers that invitation with the confusion that is taking place. But an invitation has to come. Let's assume that it is possible for that invitation to come. We now have two problems. First, the Claude Joseph group who have taken power and ostensibly are trying to pretend they're the government, have no wish for CARICOM to be involved in all of this. Their tendency is to look down on the Caribbean. And this has been a pattern of government out of Haiti. There have been few Haitian presidents who have regarded CARICOM seriously. And the Haitians themselves know very little about the Caribbean. That is something else we must understand. You remember Haiti is French-speaking. Its connection is directly to Paris as a former colonial power. It's had no links with the Caribbean. It came into CARICOM reluctantly. I think it is still in CARICOM reluctantly. There's no strong bond between the places. There is, of course, some fear, too, in the Caribbean about Haiti, particularly now, because clearly what is going to happen is refugees are going to start drifting out of the place as they've done in the past. We know that many Haitian people have been trafficked into the Caribbean as far down as Guyana and Suriname. So all of this is worrying. There's this great sense of instability. Now, CARICOM and a role for CARICOM. First of all, CARICOM can play a role as a mediator and facilitator, providing the parties are willing to accept that CARICOM should play that role. CARICOM can't push itself on Haiti. It has to say, as it has done, we are available to help to mediate and to facilitate the dialogue, a dialogue which we hope will end up with a broad-based national government of an interim nature. Let's say 12 to 18 months. There will be a postponement of these elections that are scheduled for September because they couldn't possibly be held in any circumstances that would be free, fair, and transparent. And then what has to happen is that interim government has to be given support, technical support, from various organizations. They will agree which organizations they'd like the support from. but they will need technical support, and CARICOM will have to give some of that technical support too. But immediately, one has to have an invitation issued. But if CARICOM is serious about this, it should make it clear that they are serious. And I think governments like the United States would be far more interested in seeing CARICOM trying to broker the arrangements than itself going into Haiti to do it. Because while we complain about the United States going into countries and meddling, the reality is that if not the United States, who? You know, these things cost money and they require resources. You know, you could, if a mediation process of this time could take up to 2 weeks, and you've got 2 weeks in which people have to be in place, shuttling between the various groups, trying to marry the conditions, which is what I did in 2016 as the head of the OS team. But, you know, we had the resources to do it. And then you've got to have people who know how to negotiate, know what buttons to push and when. And you know, you do need some leverage. So it would be important, even if CARICOM were to do this, that it had the support of bigger countries, which can, from time to time, be asked for help in pressing the right buttons.
But Sir Ronald, do you believe that Ariel Henry, who was last appointed by Moise as Prime Minister, that his contingency or his support system would be interested in CARICOM or might send that invitation? As you said, that Claude Joseph is not interested and would not be the kind of person who would want to send, you know, send an invitation to CARICOM to intervene.
Well, I think Claude Joseph may come to the position if, let's assume the United States, Canada, France, others believe that CARICOM would be the best interlocutors in this arrangement, then I think those countries will persuade Mr. Joseph that he should agree that CARICOM should be invited, particularly if all of the other parties on the other side wish that to happen, because then he would be the only outlier. And if he's the outlier, then you know, he exposes himself to some kind of bias. So I think that could happen, not just from Ariel Henry, but also from Joseph Lambert, the president of the Senate, who was given the support of 8 out of the 10 remaining people in the Senate to be the interim president. And of course, many political parties, civil society, and the private sector have also jointly signed up an agreement saying that's what they would like to see happen too. So I think in the next, it's got to be during this week. Action has to be taken to move this along. But we have got to be careful as CARICOM not to appear to be taking sides in this matter. We should not be coming out in support of Joseph, Henry, Lambert, anybody. What we should be saying at this point is, look, we are willing to help. We are standing by. Should you wish us to try to facilitate this dialogue between the parties, and let's hope we get an invitation from people to do it.
Now, as you said, there's a political and, you know, constitutional crisis, but even with the health crisis and the COVID pandemic at this time, shouldn't CARICOM step in to help, you know, with vaccines getting to Haiti, because it is a member and it is the poorest country and it is in a crisis and it is in need of help?
Well, you know, we are, the rest of CARICOM, we have a big difficulty getting vaccines ourselves. So it's not as if there's some magic wand that we can wave to get Haiti vaccines. We are in queues with Moderna, with Pfizer, with AstraZeneca. Shortly, we might even be in a queue with China to get vaccines. The whole world wants
Trinidad
vaccines.
was able to get 1.1 million doses of vaccines from China. So it means that somehow, somewhere, something can happen.
Yes, in China right now, because China is willing to make the supplies, but other places, you know I've been negotiating with Moderna and Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson on behalf of the government of Antigua and Barbuda in Washington. And I can tell you that they've made it clear to me that all the vaccines that they have produced have been committed to the countries that have already paid for them upfront. Now, they can't sell us any vaccines until January. So we do have to look to China right now for vaccines. We have to hope as well that the Indian crisis over vaccines alleviates somewhat, so that the Indian laboratories of AstraZeneca can start producing again. That gives us a further opportunity. At the meantime, what we really are doing is we're relying on a gift. We're relying on the United States to share its vaccines with us. We're also relying on Canada to do that. But we must remember that Canada and the United States would also have obligations to other countries that are asking for vaccines too. So
right.
The long and short of what I'm saying to you, yes, CARICOM should be calling on countries that have hoarded vaccines and have them in stock, like the United States and Canada, and those in the European Union who were getting rid of AstraZeneca, to help Haiti. But as I say, nothing we can do except to call for it, because we are not vaccine producers, and we ourselves are in a queue for vaccines. So we can make a moral argument that something needs to be done about Haiti quickly.
Yeah.
But, that argument could be made about other countries in the Caribbean too.
Sir Ronald, the conversation has definitely been interesting, and I'm sure that we've learned a lot, but we do have to wrap now. So I want to thank you so much for taking time to speak with us this morning. And, we'll continue to check in with you from time to time to just find out what's happening in Haiti so that we can be updated and get facts about what's happening. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good to have been with you.
Yes, you're most welcome. Sir Ronald Sanders there, Antigua and Barbuda ambassador to Washington, and of course to the Organization of American States, talking to us about the Haitian crisis. There's a constitutional crisis, a political crisis, a health crisis, and a humanitarian crisis. But he believes that CARICOM, with an invitation, from Haiti, can help to stabilize the things in Haiti. We take a break and we'll be back with you.